All right, part 3 of my series on building this shed greenhouse. And as you know, I'm just working on the shed at this point, so let me remove the greenhouse for now. So this is phase 1, just the shed. And up until this point, I have... And oh, by the way, this is SketchUp that I'm using to show this plan. That's what I use for all my plans. That's one of the most popular questions that I get. So today what we're going to be doing is putting the siding on and the trim around the top so that I can get the drip edge on and really make it somewhat watertight before putting the roof on, which will be the next episode. So stay tuned. All right, so taking a look at it, I started with this wall and I put a nailing strip down the bottom, just a piece of 1x4 trim, 16 feet long, and I put it even with the bottom of this 2x6 in the base. And what I found is that these sheets actually fit full height. I didn't have to cut them at all, and the 8 feet were perfect. And that's what enabled me to nail them very tightly at the bottom to the base and at the top into every rafter. So it pulled everything together very nicely. Now you may notice that I am not nailing the right edge, and that's because these sheets are made to overlap. So when I bring the next sheet up, I overlap the previous one and I drive one nail between both of them. Now this placement was not done by chance. The fact that I'm using 3.5 inches from the bottom of that 2x6, right? It allows me to drive this nail, and that nail is in the 2x6. So it's held to the foundation. The base makes it really strong. You can see that here. But it also enabled me to tie the siding to the rafters, so I don't need any kind of hurricane ties. Now you may be asking yourself, why am I prioritizing the siding over the roof? Since the sheathing is all done, why am I not putting the roof on today? So the next thing to go on the top of the wall there is a piece of trim. And if the sheathing was sticking out too far, I might have to cut it, because then I'm gonna put the drip edge on top of it. Now for this gable, I don't want the sheets to be full length. I'm gonna cut 3 sheets to 92.5 inches. On my double plate here, they'll only go to the bottom. They'll kind of split it. And then that way when I put the piece on the gable above, it'll have a place to nail to. Now you can see I modified the gable framing a little bit. What I did was I took out the center supports for the ridge and I put nailers there so that every place there was a seam for the sheets above, I'd have a place to nail them. Now that metal flashing you're seeing there, that metal strip is actually a Z flashing. And what that does is it channels the water that might hit the top piece of plywood. It channels it away from going in the building, and it's a very important piece. Here with the overhang, probably not as critical, but on the other side definitely is. It's absolutely going to get wet, so it's a must. Don't build a shed without it. I'm putting a vent in each gable on the front and the back, and here I'm just cutting it out with my circular saw and a jigsaw. Now I'll put it up permanently after I paint the building, but for now I'm just cutting the hole. All right, so yesterday was like 80 degrees and sunny, and today it is cloudy and in the 40s. Welcome to spring in New Jersey. Now there was a couple of things I wanted to revisit. First and foremost was my question from the initial episode about whether it was better to build the walls with the sheathing on it ahead of time like I did in my last shed, or build just the frame, because I was working by myself largely, build just the frame and then put the sheathing on afterwards. So that's what I wound up doing, was putting the sheathing on yesterday. And I started with this wall here, the big wall against the fence, and it worked perfectly. The sheets went all the way up, 8 feet long, no problem. Then I did this wall myself, no problem. Everything was great. But then I got to this wall and the front. And I even had help with these. And I gotta tell you, they are not square. If you're OCD, it's gonna bother you. I'm not that OCD. But what happened was, I'll show you. See that little bit of variance right there? Well, that little bit of variance translates to variance up at the top. I realized I didn't do a good job of explaining this, why this happened. But in order to keep the sheets, the edges of the sheets together, parallel, I had to lift the left sheet a little bit, and that's where that variance came from. And I guess what it was is we were trying to push it to square, but I had bracing on the inside, and it didn't really work out. And this one too was just annoying. One of the other things is that the gable here is not symmetrical. There's no line straight. They're like off from the peak a little bit. That's a minor issue, not that big of a deal, but that's because I started with a full sheet here, and it made sense because it was right up against the doorway. So that was the right thing to do, but you can still see there's some variability here in the way the sheets are not fitting perfectly. It is what it is. It's a shed. It's not going to be that noticeable once it's all painted and done. These are just things that I see because, they annoy me. I designed it, and I want everything to fit as perfect as it does in the computer, but it never does. Now we're expecting rain this week, and so one of the most important things that I want to make sure I put on after I put this trim on the edge is the drip edge. The drip edge is extremely important because what'll happen is the water will roll off the roof on top of the drip edge, and there's a profile down here that prevents the water from riding down the siding. It will actually drip off. But eventually I'm going to have a gutter here anyway, and the drip edge actually covers over the top of the gutter. So that's a good thing. All the water will roll this way. Now after I get this up, I'm going to cover it with a layer of this flashing tape, the zip system flashing tape. So that way, if it rains this week, which I'm expecting, the water will not be a problem for the sheathing that's on here. Well, if the roof is dry before you've installed the shingles, then it's going to be dry after you do. That's the good thing about this zip system and that flashing tape, is that it really does a good job of keeping the structure dry even while it's under construction. And that's why I picked it. It's been kind of rainy on and off this whole weekend, but I'm out here trying to get the trim done, and you can see that I used 1x4 on the sides with the drip edge above it, and that's how that gable gets done. I'm working on the front gable now, and I couldn't use 1x4 trim there. I had to use 1x6. And the reason for that is because I've got 2x4 framing under there, and the 1x4 wouldn't have covered it and given me enough room for a soffit. So I decided to use the 1x6 there. I just cut the ends to match the profile, and I'm gonna box them out under here. For the soffit, I've got scraps here of the LP siding and cut those to the right width. But the problem that I have, let me show you the problem. So you remember this wonky front wall, right? Well, when I put this piece in, it's not really tight over here. In fact, it's less than tight. It's less than perfect. And if I just used a single layer of this, look at that gap. I mean, that's pretty big. I'd have to do a lot of caulking there. So I'm actually gonna do a little bit of a cheat. And I cut little spacers so that I can put a double layer here. You'll never notice. It'll cover that gap, make it easier for me to caulk. And because I've got my trim is so wide, it'll be completely hidden. You're never gonna notice. To finish off these ends, I used a scrap piece of 1x6 and I cut it to fit right in there, and then a scrap piece of 1x4 down with the profile of the 512 pitch, and that little piece fits right in there. And then all I did was nailed it in with my finish nailer. I have a pneumatic finish nailer, and that's what I'll be using to put the trim on where I can see the nails. Hey there, if you're new to the channel, be sure to subscribe and hit that bell icon to be the first to know when new videos are posted. Look for HandyDadTV on Facebook, Twitter, and Instagram, and visit the website HandyDadTV for more great ideas and information.